So many people are having digestive issues and they're changing their diet and they're doing all these things, they're taking supplements, but it's not really working. And that's probably because there's something else going on that I want to share with you today. It's kind of a hidden source of digestive problems that you need to be aware of. And when I tell you this, it'll make sense. And you maybe already knew it, but it's called stress. Okay. And I'm going to talk about the specific types of stress that influence our digestion the most. But this stress digestive problem link is huge. So I'm going to go through exactly what happens when you go through stress. And this will kind of be mind blowing when you think about it. But if you even look at the autonomic nervous system in relationship to the two different systems, well, actually, there's three. You have the sympathetic flight or fight mechanism, and then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is also called rest and digest. Most of the healthy digestion occurs in a parasympathetic, low stress state. But you also have another part of the autonomic nervous system, the system that works on automatic, called the enteric nervous system. And that's another system that's directly embedded into your digestive system, and that links right up to the this thing called the vagus nerve that goes up to the brain. And this is why whatever's going on down here is going to affect up here. But it's a two-way street. Whatever's going on up here, as in stress, can go down here as well. And that is what we're going to be focusing on today. When we talk about digestion, if we take a look at the foundational part of digestion, it's a cell, and it's a single layer cell in your small intestine and the large that's called the enterocyte. Okay. Now, in the colon, it's usually referred to as the colonocyte, but basically, it's a little cell that absorbs things, minerals, trace minerals, vitamins, amino acids, and longer amino acids called peptides, and lipids, which are fats, and B12, and even bile. So these cells are constantly absorbing these nutrients. Okay. And of course, they're broken down from the acid in the stomach, the enzymes in the stomach, and a lot of the enzymes within the small intestine, as well as the pancreas as well as the bile does help break down the fat to a certain level. So then the enzyme can break it down even more. But at some point, it needs to be absorbed into these little cells. One interesting thing about these cells or this layer of cells is the surface area is massive. The body's very smart, and strategically, the way that it increases surface area is by kind of having these folds. Okay. Like if you took an accordion or like a slinky, for example, and you stretch it out, it would be a lot longer, right? Well, same thing with the intestines. You have these little villi, which are little um, pouches that kind of come up and down like this. So basically, it can actually increase the surface area, but within each villi or little um, pouch, you have these tiny little cells and then hairs, which are like kind of a micro version of these villi extending from that little cell. So if you were to stretch all that out, you're going to get a tremendous amount of surface area to do the job of absorption. Now, these colonocytes or these enterocytes aren't the only cells. There's other cells. I don't want to get into that, but they some cells that produce mucus, a mucus layer as a protection uh, between like pathogens and microbes, and then the actual surface area as well. So that's just a side note. All right, so now let's talk about the consequence of stress in your digestive tract. Well, number one, there's a conversion of the bacteria to something called biofilms, which are these colonies of microbes that band together and they start to develop either a slime or even a calcium little protective mechanism so they can go underneath the radar with your immune system. And because a lot of these guys are pathogenic and they create a lot of problems, but you're going to get more biofilms developing when you have more stress. That's their survival mechanism. Number two, you get an erosion of the mucosal layer. Now, if it keeps eroding more and more and more, you end up eventually get an ulcer. And maybe you've heard the link between H. pylori and ulcers, and that's because of the microbial infection. You see, the H. pylori is normally in your stomach, hanging out, not creating any problem. Okay. But when you stress it, it comes out of remission and it starts to hammer you and create immune reactions. And they don't know exactly why that mucosal layer becomes destroyed, but it does. And then you start getting an ulcer. And so the way they treat it is with antibiotics. That gives you a bunch of other problems. I'm going to recommend a much safer remedy, sulforaphane, which is in broccoli sprouts, it's in cabbage and radish, or zinc carnosine. Zinc carnosine helps you reestablish this mucosal layer in your stomach, in the top part of the intestine, and even the large colon. And another thing it can do is potently inhibit H. pylori. And it's a really good anti inflammatory. And apparently, stress inhibits this zinc. Okay. But zinc carnosine is the best to take for an ulcer or for gastritis or for an eroding mucosal layer. These microbes are very strategic and very smart and sneaky because H. pylori produces this enzyme to make more urea, which then turns into ammonia. And the pH of ammonia is really super high. It's very, very alkaline. And that's how it counters the acid in your stomach to survive. So if you can understand that and keep your stomach strongly acidic, you can kind of keep this H. pylori at bay. But it can start doing more damage in an alkaline environment. Just remember that. So with stress, you get more biofilms, you get this erosion of the mucosal layer, you get decreased transit time of food particles going through the digestive tract. This is called constipation. I mean, even think about this. When you go through stress, what do you feel? You feel like a knot in your stomach, maybe nauseous, because it locks everything up. It takes a very relaxed state to be able to digest and have things travel through nicely. The actual bacteria during a stress state start to feed off these enterocytes, and it can start to break them down to the point where you start getting leaky gut, which now there's spaces or an increased permeability. And this is not good because food particles and proteins and all sorts of things can then travel through, and they don't go through the normal immigration. And this creates an immune reaction because your body now senses even good things as bad things, potentially incorrectly identifying them as pathogens. And now you have antibodies against maybe some good things, your own tissues, foods that are good for you. And now you're allergic to those as well. So allergies and autoimmune diseases really stem from this leaky gut situation. You get an alteration of the ratios of bad to good. You get more bad pathogenic microbes versus good. You also get a decreased diversity of microbes. You get decrease of total microbes. So the relationship of these microbes starts to change when the environment is stressful. Of course, this is going to lead to inflammation. So these are all the different things that can happen. I recently did a video on stress relating to damage to the heart muscle, right? Because adrenaline causes hypoxia, a lack of oxygen. Well, now we're talking about how stress affects the digestive system directly. Now, let's touch on the type of stress that creates these problems. Probably the biggest thing is emotional stress. This can happen after a loss of a loved one, a loss of a job, loss of money, loss of anything, or an ongoing emotional stress that you're stuck in and can't get out of it. That's the worst type of stress. It could be related to the environment, the world, relationships, anything. It has a profound effect over your digestion. And anything you can do to improve that would be very beneficial to your gut issues. And I have a ton of videos on how to cope with stress, nose breathing, controlling your breath, especially when you're sleeping, going for long walks. There are so many things you can do exercise wise. There's just many things. Now, another big stress for these microbes and your lining of your colon and your small intestine is antibiotics, okay? And also things that act like an antibiotic, like chlorine in tap water, artificial sweeteners, GMO foods that have glyphosate. Glyphosate is an herbicide that is classified as an antibiotic. And then you also have all the foods that are sterilized, okay? Pasteurized milk products, pasteurized juice, pasteurization, canned foods, box foods, preservatives, processed foods. But the more the food is cooked, the more it's dead. It lacks enzymes, but more importantly, it lacks microbes, okay? Good microbes. and they do this to increase shelf life. And that comes with the package. You're creating an encouragement of sterilization of your own microbiome. Anytime you take an antibiotic, you better at the same time start taking a probiotic. But there's some other interesting stresses that I want to talk about that directly relate to your digestive system. And one being intravenous feeding. When you're in ICU, in the hospital, or for other situations, you have to be fed through an IV. Boy, does it create a lot of problems with your digestive system. And your liver, a fatty liver, liver disease, increased risk of infections, blood clots, severe deficiencies of all sorts of things. And I'm just bringing that up because if you have to take this or you know someone taking this, um, you might want to look for a more quality um, type of intravenous food because what they use for the calories is they use soybean oil. Wow. You're going to inject someone with soybean oil, and that's very, very high in omega 6. It creates a lot of problems in the liver, like I said, a fatty liver. And there's a lot of research to back that up. If it creates that many problems injected, what is it doing in our diet, right? Creates some other issues. It's not a safe product. And also in this intravenous feeding, this glucose, they put glucose, synthetic vitamins, um, minerals that are probably not in the right form, not good. Now, I mentioned ICU, right? Um, critical care. This creates a lot of digestive problems because when someone's in that state of critical care, a lot of times they're fed their nutrition through an IV, which I already mentioned all the problems with that. But they a lot of times put someone on a PPI, an antacid type medication, which creates more stress within the digestive system itself. And then they put you on an antibiotic, right? So you're just putting massive stress on these microbes at the worst time, a critical care situation. And sometimes they feed you epinephrine and they have to, but you have to realize what that's doing to your gut flora. It's creating hypoxia. Okay. It's creating more stress. Because what is epinephrine? That's a stress hormone. You inject it right in the person. Now, sometimes you have to, but boy, you better be doing something to kind of counter some of the bad effects. And then let's say they use opiates, right? Opiates really shut down your GI system. So now we have all these pathogens that are stuck there. You have constipation as a side effect. And I even know when you have like anesthetics, they put you out. A lot of people wake up and they can't urinate, they can't eliminate. There's just so many problems with surgeries and ICU that I think more attention needs to put on this critical time where you're in the hospital, and it's just amazing how anyone survives that. And just as a side note, when you take antacids or anything that addresses the pH of your stomach, whether it's PPIs or other types of medication, and you start raising the pH of that stomach above 3.8, okay, normally it should be between 1 and 3. When it goes above 3.8, you start getting overgrowth of bacteria in the wrong place in your small intestine. And so now, every time you eat fiber, guess what? You have microbes in the wrong place. That's going to start to ferment in your small intestine and create a lot of bloating. So, I'm just bringing this up because the solution of fixing one problem ends up giving you another problem. So the question is now, what can we do about it? Number one, do whatever you can to reduce this stress. And I put some links down below of things to help you cope with stress, in addition to eliminating the source of the stress, right? Okay, number two, L-glutamine is really beneficial to heal an inflamed gut as well as a leaky gut. L-glutamine, that's a really good remedy. All right, number three, probiotics and fermented foods, as in kefir, if you don't have a dairy problem, like in some allergy or lactate intolerance problem. Sauerkraut is really awesome. But here's the thing, if you have sauerkraut or kimchi or some type of fermented vegetables, like pickles, for example, and you have more bloating from that, then you're going to have to do the carnivore diet for a while because that's one way to address severe inflammatory problems in the bowel as well as SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where you have a lot of bloating. Because every time you have fiber, it feeds the microbes, and these microbes are in the wrong place. Now, if you haven't seen another really good video on digestion, you should check this out, which gives you a lot of the remedies that are not necessarily related to stress, but other things. And I put that up right here. Check it out.